Welcome to Ask GMBN Tech, where you get to ask me, well, and the collective GMBN Tech team, really good questions. And all you have to do is put the hashtag AskGMBNTech on one of the comments in any of the videos on the channel, and we'll answer them. We've got our first question here. This is from Il Morg. So he asks, short version is, would a 35mm carbon bar be more compliant than a 31.8 alloy bar? Well, fun question. What we're talking about is alloy versus carbon in a bar situation. What we're also talking about is the clamp area. So this is a 31.8 bar, and you can get 35mm, and that's that diameter just in there. So the really brief logic is that if you had an alloy bar in this 35mm, it might be quite stiff. If you had a carbon bar in the same 35mm clamp area, it could be compliant. And then vice versa, if you had a carbon bar in a 31.8, it might be flexy. So the big thing is that all the different materials can have really different ride properties, and the different clamp diameters are going to give subtly different ride feels too. So I think that's the first factor, is no two bars are alike. And some brands, say 1UP for example, they're making carbon bars and they're making alloy bars in a 35mm size, but they're designing them specifically to be more compliant. And they're able to do that because this wider middle section, they're able to taper other sections. A couple of other brands are doing it too. You've got MV, Raceface as well. They all say that the 35mm clamp diameter actually gives them more space to build in a bit more compliancy. But I think the big thing is that, well, it's down to the bar. It's also down to the width of the bar as well. So if you're running a 760 or a 800, that extra width is going to make, well, the bar feel differently. So I don't think it's as clean cut as being able to say carbon one does this and an alloy one does this. I think lots of bars these days are aiming for a more compliant ride, and that's a good thing because lots of stiff bars with lots of buzz can be uncomfortable. Okay, great question here from JJ Adams. Do hardtails really make you faster? Well, to answer this one, actually Anna's done a video about 2 years ago where, yeah, you'll be able to tell. Effectively, yeah, they can do. The logic is that a hardtail requires more strength and more skill to navigate. So more strength because you've got to sort of muscle the bike through stuff, and this is on cross-country terrain and, you know, technical terrain. So the idea is that you ride a hardtail lots and lots and you become a better and stronger rider. Yeah, I think hardtails can be great. Where they might struggle is where you're in really technical terrain, because the margin of error on a sort of some tech sections on a hardtail can be very, very fine. If you kind of misplace your rear wheel, you could end up heading out the front door, which would not be great. And on a suspension bike, there is just that bit more margin for error. So potentially, by being a little bit more comfortable on a full suspension bike on those techie bits, you might end up being faster. However, Anna, in her video, rode for solidly 30 days and she was faster in most places. And this is compared to a full suspension bike. She wasn't any faster on the technical sections compared to the full suspension bike, but I think it's that thing of one feeds into the other, so it's quite good. So I guess the other thing, looping around, is that it's horses for courses. So if you live somewhere where you're kind of riding lots of cross country and you're riding to find the horizon and you're going long distance, a hardtail can be amazing. They can be really good. If you're riding technical terrain, they can still be good, but there's that margin of error. So it will depend on where you ride and what you're riding. If you're liking really technical terrain and you're riding that all the time, potentially a suspension bike might be better. The other factor is geometry of the bikes. So suspension bikes have progressed a lot, but as you'll find out in Anna's buyer's guide, which is coming out fairly soon, of hardtails, we've got some hardcore sort of all-mountain hardtails, which, well, offer up a lot of the suspension benefits of a longer travel bike because they're slacker and just more capable. I've got lots of dropper post height to drop down, so they can be really, really capable. They're not always going to get the same traction as a full suspension, but I guess it comes down to where you're riding, what you're riding, and what you enjoy. So if you still like rocking a hardtail, keep riding it. Okay, great question here from XCX. 8646. Suntour forks ship without oil, but people seem to be adding them when they service them. Are they right to do so, or does the design not need it? Serious question. He's not interested in hearing about buying RockShox or Fox. Don't worry, you're not going to hear me telling you to buy RockShox or Fox. We're here to help you with your question. So yeah, using that hashtag AskGMBNTech will get you some tech advice. Okay, Suntour do a couple of different forks, and I think we're talking at the kind of lower end, the entry level. So we've got the XCT and the XCM, and they are shipped in a sort of like a different format to a degree, with minimal lubrication in the lowers. And that's because, well, if we go for the XCM first, those are a sort of a spring fork. So we've got a coil spring as our coil medium, and inside the kind of internals are fantastic exploded diagrams from SR Suntour. So if you do need to strip them down, they are available as sort of like a detailed teardown manual. But they're using friction damping. So it's a sort of sub-assembly within each leg, and that will use grease as well as this spring and as well as some bushing assembly to just help slow down the fork and control that spring. And as such, they don't need a fancy oil damper. They don't need to have oil in the lower leg. They haven't got a piston in there. They're just relying on that friction damper setup. So with those, yeah, it's true, they don't have oil in them, and grease will be really good. With the subtly named but different XCT version of the fork, again, fantastic exploded diagram on the Suntour website that you can have a look at. That one does use a coil in one side and a seal damper cartridge in the other leg. And that means that, no, you don't have to add oil inside because it's in this seal cartridge. And that, again, is the damper unit. So they'll have a piston moving through oil. You might be able to break it down. Again, I feel like there will be instructions on how to tear down even the damper on the SR Suntour website. So yeah, you might have to add oil inside that seal cartridge, and you might be able to change some of the damping characteristics by switching the weight of that oil. But at the moment, no, I don't think you have to splash oil in there. Some of the other brands that you've mentioned that we shouldn't mention have oil put into the lower leg of the assembly, and that's designed to splash around and help with a little foam ring on some of the kind of fancier forks underneath that lip seal that helps keep the fork leg both sort of clean and lightly oiled. So that's why you might see some people pouring oil inside their forks. They're designed to work like that. To conclude, there are real benefits of running grease in your fork. So these entry-level forks from Suntour, really good. They're a good option. The grease will work a bit like the oil in reducing friction, so your forks will work better. They'll also kind of resist any corrosion or water ingress, so that's a good thing, keeps them going even longer, and it will help protect the seals as well. So really good forks that can work in lots of different conditions. Interesting question here that's got my grey matter thinking. This one's from Original Bar Ends. Not bar ends, we've discussed those previously. So he's got a Mondraker Superfoxy Carbon. This bike came with headset cups, which could change the head angle. Unfortunately, his upper headset cup keeps rotating from the kind of orientation which is meant to do. How can you stop this? To be fair, I've seen this on other bikes as well. Some of the downhill bikes that I used to work on had a 44mm cup top and bottom, and we could put in an offset cup to change the geometry. And there wasn't any kind of like locking rings, there weren't any alignment tabs, you just had to eyeball it. Which was easier said than done sometimes, but it was easy to go in. I was really lucky and didn't have any kind of migration of those parts, and that was mainly because I was working on a very fresh race bike, and I also didn't have any issues because it was aluminium and it was all really tight. So with carbon, I would say the first thing to do is have a look at your upper headset sort of on the frame where the head tube is, and just double check that there isn't any cracking or flaring, because what can happen sometimes is as you're turning, because it's slightly misaligned, the twisting motion can basically set the other one in phase, and you can kind of get stuff starting to twist, which isn't ideal, which is why the upper cup is moving. So I think have a look at that, check the frame is not damaged, that's the first port of call. What could have happened, hopefully this is what's happened, is that upper -1 degree cup has just worn a little bit, and it only needs to be a tiny bit worn for it to start to move. I think what you should probably do is try and drift it out, take a measurement of it, double check with your Mondraker owner's manual and check the dimensions of it, because I suspect it might just be slightly slimmer than it needs to be. So options are a new upper cup that's actually true to size, so just make sure that it fits. The other option is maybe trying an all new headset. Again, I think it was specific to Mondraker, so what I would do is check the documentation that you've got with your Mondraker bike, or check their website, there's lots of details on there, and check that, yeah, the upper cup is true to size. Check that it's not the frame that's damaged as well, but I'm very confident there are options. If, unfortunately, the frame is cracked, do talk to Mondraker before doing anything rash. I'm sure there will be some suggestions from some people about you can just glue it in. Well, you could glue it in, but it might cause extra stress and extra wear on other parts. And yeah, you don't want your head tube coming off from the rest of your mainframe. Unfortunately, sorry, I can't remedy anything any more than that, but just double check the dimensions of that upper cup. Maybe it's time for a fresh one. Hope that helps. Fun question here. This is from Adam R. Cope. He said, "Hi team, love that, very inclusive, good start. I had a problem with one of the pistons seized on my Deore brake. Tried to loosen it, but resulted in damaging it. So took the whole caliper apart to investigate what happened, and the other 3 pistons were cracked on the inside, oil side. How does this happen? How do I prevent it happening again?" Yeah, pistons can seize. There's a number of different factors that can cause it, and so it can be kind of a lack of lubrication on the seals. So if they've been under kind of lots of duress, lots of grit, lots of grime, lots of classic UK mountain biking, yeah, the uneven pressure can cause issues, and you can have misaligned pads and thus pistons as well. Yeah, I think the force coming from the inside, I mean, that's sort of indicative of something stuck probably on the outside as well. Anna's done a great video on how to service your pistons and making sure that all 4 of them, or even all 6 of them if you've got a 6-part, are all working evenly. Now, to be fair, with a very dissimilar brake, it was on a gravel bike, but I too have cracked a ceramic piston. It's quite surprising, or maybe not though surprising. They're very small, very delicate. They're designed to put lots of pressure through those pads, but they can be quite fragile. So I think it's easy to forget that when we're kind of in a bit of a rush. No, this is me I'm talking about. In a bit of a rush and you're pushing those pistons back in, you're trying to seat the pads back out and you're trying to seat the pistons. It is easy to kind of get carried away, but these are quite fragile and delicate parts. So pushing on pistons, whether they be resin or ceramic, it is surprisingly easy to damage them. There are other ways that you could have damaged them. Could have been heat damage, so you've kind of really prolonged exposure to really, really high heats. Could be corrosion, could be contamination as well. For me, unfortunately, I do fear that it might just be that force. You'd be surprised of how easy it can be to just fracture or crack a piston. So yeah, you can get replacement calipers, which actually then give you all the spares you need. So you could take the pistons out, you can take the seals out and rebuild it on situ on your bike. So you don't have to just replace the caliper, but you could do that too. Hope that helps. Question here from Whichway9068. What's the best way to identify if the cassette needs replacing? Well, we're going to look at it. That's how we're going to inspect it. So worn teeth, over time, you're going to see that the cassette shape of the teeth is going to change. They're going to elongate, so the gaps in between the teeth effectively grow, and they kind of, if they get really worn, they sort of start to take on a shark fin-like appearance where they're kind of wearing over and arcing like that. You might notice it actually if you look at kind of smaller gears that you don't use that much compared to the other cassette where you use the gears quite a lot, and you can see the change in shape. There will be kind of missing teeth, but that's those shift gaps that help you move up and down the shift block. I guess the other thing is if you're taking a long time to shift up and down the cassette, well, that's indicative that it's not just the chain that's worn, but maybe the cassette. We're talking about cassettes, we're talking about chains, and we should look at how your chain wears. And you can get dedicated tools to look at chain wear. So a chain wear tool is a really good investment in keeping your drive chain longer. It measures the gaps between all the links, and specifically not really the links, but where the rollers are and how quickly they wear out. If you're replacing your chain before 0.5% of stretch, then often you can get away with just replacing the chain more often. But if it goes over that, the chain wear, because of the change in those roller diameters, means that it eats through your cassette as well, and then eventually it will also wear out your chain ring. So it is a system, and sometimes you can get away with replacing small bits. Yeah, ultimately, if you've kind of replaced the chain and it's still skipping and still wearing, it's probably time to replace the cassette, but do also look at your chain ring. You've got to replace everything at once if everything has become too worn. Okay, hopefully that's helped. If you've got a burning question that you want to ask us here on GMBN Tech, just use the hashtag Ask GMBN Tech on any of our videos in any of the comments. We'll try and find it and try and answer it for you.